All right, everyone, welcome back to Work-Life Harmony. I have a guest back again for round two, and honestly, I could probably just have you back every week, Rachel.
I would love to be here as often as
Rachel
possible.
Bailey has become my new obsession since we met. I don't even remember how we got connected last year. But now what, I'm going to butcher your official title. What is your official title?
I just call myself a parenting specialist.
Okay, parenting. I was going to say a parenting expert. And I had Rachel on the show. I'll put a link to it in the show notes of our previous episode. But I have learned so much from following all the content that you share, Rachel, on, and I feel like us talking together is always so beneficial because, I'm always coming at things so much more from that structure, time, organization, and you have shed so much light on to me when it comes to juggling all the things, particularly as a parent, on the importance of how I'm treating myself, the words I'm using for myself, what's going on in my mind, along with really tactical strategies that have helped me manage parenting as well. So I'm thrilled to have you back. And we're going to have a discussion today around, with the holidays coming very, very soon, managing all those big emotions at home as a parent, as a person, as a wife, as a mom, as all the things that we are. But before we jump into that, for those of you that have not listened to previous episodes, why don't you go ahead and share a little bit about your background, and then we'll start this fun conversation.
Sounds good. So I am a mom, first and foremost. My kiddos right now are 8 and 10. I have two daughters who are doing virtual learning. So we're at home together all the time. In addition, my background is really clinical psychology. So I have a master's degree in clinical psych. I have been in the field of psychology for about 16 years now. So the first part of my career, I worked with children and adolescents. I was an ADHD coach. I was what's called an intensive in-home mentor. So I was actually going into people's homes to help with a lot of the family dynamics. And then I was trained as a therapist. But what happened was, about maybe 3 or 4 years into working with kids and teens, I noticed parents were really struggling. And they would say, Rachel, I'm glad that you're helping my child, but like, what do I do when you're not around? What do I do when my child is melting down? Or when I have the holidays coming up and I know my children are going to be overstimulated and their cousins are coming, and how do I handle that? So I realized this need for like these practical tools for parents. And so I actually pivoted about 10 years ago now. Instead of working with the kids and the teens, now I work with parents. And it really is about the practical tools. I take a lot of my clinical background, my experience, but it's about like, how do I handle, when my child says no to me and I ask them to do something, or when I have too much on my plate and I yell at my kids as a result.
Well, that never happens to me. No, never.
Me neither. I'm perfect all the time. Now, and that's probably the last thing I should say is that one of the reasons I love my job is because I'm so far from a perfect parent myself. It's not natural to me. I am not that like bubbly, patient person at all. So I'm glad I do this for a living because I need the help too. So the fact that I talk about it helps me. So I'm glad it helps you. It also helps me.
I don't know about you, but when I look back at, before having our daughter, I had this whole like movie in my head of what I was going to be like as a mom. And then I became one. And I feel like it's like the horror show version. It's the reality.
Exactly. That's so true. Yeah, you never know until you're there what it's going to be like.
No, you don't. So let's talk about, we've got the holidays, and I think this is, like everything this year, they're going to look different. The usual, a lot of trips probably aren't happening. Maybe shared responsibilities aren't happening with, multiple families getting together. Some people I know have traditions that they're devastated that they will no longer be able to do due to social distancing and all of that. What do you see as, kind of an impact that our kids and even the parents are going through, and what we do to make it still just a nice, as stress-free as possible time, but understanding that it is different. And so what can we do to help with that?
Yeah. And I think you're right. What's really hard for people is that it's different. And so much of it is out of our control. So much of everything right now is out of our control. And the human brain doesn't do well with different and feeling out of control. And so the difference means a loss of those traditions. Like you said, it's a sadness that we can't, get together with family and have a big group around the fireplace and do these, telling stories. We can't do that. So the difference creates a sadness. And the feeling out of control almost creates, well, what is it going to look like, and how is this going to be? And it creates almost this low level of anxiety or worries or concerns, and that's really hard for both children and parents. But the children very honestly also sense what we're feeling as well. So it's hard for kids because they're losing their traditions, but it's also hard for them because they feel our worries and concerns. And is this going to be good enough for our children? They sense that, so it makes it even harder for them.
It's interesting when you were just saying that that loss of control of wanting to ask over and over. I was like, oh my goodness, I literally just lived that in the car with my daughter this morning.
Yes.
She battles some anxieties, and for her, it's we have to just re-say it over and over and over, which is very hard for me because that's not my natural inclinations. But even just hearing you say that, I'm already like, okay, Megan, step into this holiday season preparing to have those conversations many times for her.
Absolutely. And recognize that asking questions over and over is not about getting the answer for her. She's already gotten the answer. It's a symptom that either that is comforting to ask the question, or that it's actually not even about the question. That it's just, it's not, if the answer doesn't work, then it's not the answer that she's looking for. It's something else. It's a connection, or it's a routine that this is what normally happens. And so it makes me feel more in control. It's not usually about the question.
I am laughing because I'm flashing back to about 2 weeks ago. I don't even remember what the topic was that came up. Her and I are talking. And it's something, we have beat that dead horse a million times over. And she asked it again. Mm-hmm. And I paused. I said, are we really gonna go do this again? Mm-hmm. And this little voice goes, yep.
Yes.
And I just started laughing. But hearing you say that now, I'm like, okay, that's what that was about.
Yeah, it's not about the answer. It's about whatever asking questions gives her. One of the things you can do too is, instead of answering the question, you can say, hey, you've asked me that a lot. Do you need a hug? Are you feeling okay? Is something bothering you? And realizing that it's actually not about the question. Now, some kids will be aware that they need something more. Some kids will not. But if you want to break free of that cycle, you can also try to do something different and realize that the question symbolizes a struggle.
So that's great. So then maybe I won't have to have the conversation for the 18th time that day.
Right.
That's a great one.
That's true.
All right, good. So as we think about, my biggest concern for the holidays, and it was funny because I wasn't even aware that this was a stressor for people. We tend to have a very quiet, small holiday at home anyway. So most of our traditions are just between my husband and daughter and I. So we're not going to be seeing a huge shift in a lot of that. Now, there are some things we aren't going to be able to do, but I look at the upcoming holidays and I see a whole lot of vacation because they've extended the winter break to give the teachers a break, which God willing, they desperately need, for schools that are in cleaning, all of that. So I'm looking at my month of December all the way into mid-January going, this is a lot of downtime together. Mm-hmm. And that is what creates a little bit of stress and anxiety for me. Whereas my daughter's like, woohoo, no school. Mm-hmm. What are some strategies and things that we can think about putting into place where I know my go-to usually is the outdoors, like mm-hmm. let's get outside, mm-hmm. but it's very hard to do in potential snow, cold weather. We're not outside for 3 hours to kind of process all the feels and all the stuff that's going on. Yes. So what do you have to share with us to manage that?
Yeah. So for a lot of parents, it's funny because their kids are either at school and there's this big long period of time, or their kids are at home doing school, but there is no school, so they're going to be bouncing off the walls. So, and this is a question that obviously comes up COVID times or non-COVID times. What do you do with this large unstructured time? So the first thing to consider is, even though it's holiday time, we can still create structure. Kids actually do better, and this is why they sometimes behave better in school. We can create structure ourselves. Mm-hmm. They behave better in school because they know what's coming first, what's coming second, what's coming third. And the temptation is to say, well, let's all stay up later and let's all do these fun things. And that's fine. You can stay up later, but do it predictably. Have a routine. routines are still really, really important. So that's the first thing. Keep routines, keep some sort of structure. Does not have to be as uptight or as, 8 to 9 is going to be this, but a flow is still really important. It's going to make you feel more in control, and it's going to make your daughter feel more in control too.
I'm
if they
glad to
know
hear you
you.
say that, because that's always I like structure. So that's always my inclination, but then I feel guilty because I'm like, oh, but it's supposed to be holiday time. We're supposed to be, and I just I don't function, I don't
Yeah,
function well without the structure. So it's nice to know that it's not taking away from the fun and flexibility and downtime of a holiday to still
right.
have, like, we do let her bedtime go later during vacation time, but we still have set that time.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's not bad. It's actually a good thing. But what we can go from, like I said, from a timed plan day to more of a routine day. What's going to happen first and second and third. But yeah, having no structure at all is actually not good for anybody. And parents, if we, and I also don't do well without structure. And if we're not in a good place, that makes the situation worse. Because like I was saying before, they sense us. So if
Mhm.
we like structure, it's a good idea to keep structure. It can
Okay.
look a little different. It can be more flexible, but it should still be there.
I like that difference of, you said, what the routine versus the,
Yeah. Versus like the timing, you don't
yeah,
have to have a timed schedule, what
I
we're going to do
like
from
that.
9 to 10, more of a flow to your day and a routine to your day. So first we're going to do this, then we're going to do this, then we're going to do this. So it is a little bit more flexible. Kids feel the difference from we have to rush out of the house by 8 o'clock to, then we're going to take our time with breakfast. And then we're going to maybe take a walk outside. And so routines can be a lot more forgiving than an
Yeah.
actual calendared structured day. Yeah.
I love that differentiation because, I'm so connected to the calendar and the time slots and all of that. But when I think back over like summer break, uh, the one that was what, 12 months long?
Right.
Last summer it felt like. I realized when we finally got into a flow that we had a routine we did every day, but there was no time
Right.
slots next to it. Things ran a little smoother. Things were a little less stressful because we knew that, yeah, we do this next, but when the exact moment of next was a lot more fluid than usual.
Absolutely. That, and it's important, kids, for the kids, the world is really big, and to not have any knowledge of what's coming next is very hard for them. So just knowing what the basic routine is can be very, very comforting. And yeah, taking your time and being slower is absolutely a way to do your routine. Yes.
Now I'm going to put you on the spot because I didn't tell you I was going to ask you this, but I
That's
think
okay.
you're just going to give me that great bit of wisdom. Any tips on how we might create a routine for our families over the holiday break?
Yeah, absolutely. Start with what you are already doing. Obviously, I mean, we have the routine that we normally have. And very simply, keep in the things that are important to you, the things that you like. And I would just, plan your day based on what's working for you, what's worked in the past, what you want to keep, get rid of the things that you don't, and then write it down. That's going to be key. Write it down and modify if you have to. But it's
Mhm.
just think about what you've usually done, what's usually worked, and create it from that. That's simply what I would do.
And how much input do you give to your kids on what that routine should look like?
So I would have a basic idea of how you want the day to go. So I always say when we're talking to our kids, we want to get them as involved as possible, but you
Right.
want to enter the conversation with your non-negotiables. You always want to enter because you're the parent, you get to
Yeah.
decide. Enter the conversation with at least we need to fit in, exercise, chores, and 3 meals. Those are your non-negotiables. But then give them ownership over as much within your non-negotiables as possible. So when are we going to do this? How are we going to do this? What's it going to look like? Give them ownership within, but you want to start with what do we need in this family to happen? And then give them a lot more input. The other thing you can do at the end of a conversation is say, okay, when do you want to revisit this? Let's see in 3 days how it's doing. So I always build in that revisit with kids as well,
That's
because that also
smart.
gives them an opportunity to make mistakes and learn from them.
And to feel okay going, I know my daughter's always worried about I made a bad choice.
Yeah.
So if we say, hey, we'll revisit it, that now opens the door for her to go, eh.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really healthy lesson to teach kids. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. If you could give everybody kind of your biggest tip for parents right now on as they're starting to get anxious about the gift giving, the cooking, the how am I going to create, if you are a family that maybe is used to really large festivities and now you're going small, what are some of the top tips that we can be using for ourselves
Mm.
to help keep that atmosphere a place that then we're not projecting that onto everybody else in the home?
Yeah. So the first thing I would suggest is for parents to sit down, take 5 or 10 minutes, this doesn't have to take long, and think about how they want things to look. Really considering, I always say, sort of have a forward self. Think about if you looked back on this 2 years from now, what would make you feel good? If this holiday season ended up looking like this, I would feel really good 2 years from now looking back on it. So first you want to decide, what is the end in mind that I have? And I really do suggest thinking what would make you feel good in the future. So create an end vision of how you want this holiday to look, and then figure out what the steps are to get you there. Now, that's the simple place to start. What's going to happen is things are going to distract us. We're going to say, oh, well, I wanted to have, Christmas at this place, but my brother got mad at me because of this and that. So what we want to learn how to do is deal with the distractions. That's really the hard part. The easy part is figuring out, what do I want it to look like? How do I get there? The hard part is dealing with the discomfort of what enters our lives. And it's so much about tuning into ourselves and tuning out what the noise is and the expectations. And, we so often make decisions from a place of fear. Well, if I don't do this, then bad things will happen. And there's too much fear right now. So we really have to focus more on, what are our values? What do we need? What do we want? And how can we stick with our values even when the discomfort arises? So I don't know if that answers your question. I hope it does.
No, I think that does, because I think what it does is, when we put that thoughtfulness ahead of time into, I want to be able to look back and say, these things happen. When all those other things pops up, if you have something to go back to, that helps you really protect your yeses and your nos, I think, a lot more, to say, we get shoulded, we get guilted. Well, so-and-so's mom makes her gingerbread from scratch. Well,
Right.
Yay her, I buy the $7 box at Michael's, and to understand what I want is that fun time of sitting down and decorating the houses together. Me personally, I don't need to actually make everything from scratch,
Right.
or whatever those things are that are going to guilt us, should us, distract us into putting unnecessary stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. And what I always do with parents is, when that guilt arises, understanding what the fear is, because we always want to parent from a place of values, not a place of fear. So our values are going to tell us what we want it to look like. Our fear is going to say, well, if I don't make it from scratch, then people are going to talk about me. Then they're going to think I'm not doing enough. Then I'm going to feel like I'm not enough. Those are the fears we have to sort of work through. I talk a lot about the thoughts we have as being useful or non-useful. So we have a lot of non-useful thoughts that aren't necessarily inaccurate. Like, if you fear people are going to talk about you because you didn't make something from scratch, that may be an accurate thought. People really may talk about you, but it's not a useful thought.
Right. And who cares?
Yes. But it's so hard to say who cares, because there's a piece of us that says, well, I care because, and this is something I work through parents with. Why do you care? It often says something about our value or our worth, or it goes back to our primal need to feel like we are enough, to feel connected, to feel accepted, to feel loved. And it often comes back from our childhood. So we have to understand, well, why do I care if someone says that? And how can I create a more useful thought that helps me meet my goal of the vision I had for myself, and, helps me work through some of those fears that I have.
I love that distinction of useful, because I would always say hurtful or not, but that's not getting it. The useful versus not useful.
Yes, useful thoughts help you meet your goals.
Distinction.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Oh, you've got me thinking about all these thoughts I know I have in my head, and I'm already starting to go, oh, that one's not useful. That one's not useful.
Yes.
Is there any, do you do any system of journaling or writing or anything to help identify those?
Absolutely. I have parents do what I call a yuck dump, where you write down all the things that are causing you stress or discomfort in some way. I call that yuck. So do a yuck dump, and we actually go through systematically, go through thoughts. Are they useful? Are they not useful? Are these, can you take action that's in your control? So there is a system I actually absolutely use with parents, where we're figuring out how we can replace non-useful thoughts. And remember, I really want to emphasize this. Non-useful thoughts may be accurate. So someone may get mad at you if you set a boundary. They're just not useful in that they don't help you create the holiday that you want. So we can replace non-useful thoughts with useful thoughts. And then the next step is always, okay, once you have a useful thought, what action can you take that aligns with that useful thought? So it's replacing the thought with a useful one, and then what action can you take? And lastly, a lot of people get uncomfortable taking that action, and we just work through that discomfort. So it's the thought, the action, the discomfort.
That is, I mean, I'm already thinking of how many ways I can implement that with my daughter as well, of all those, especially with the social nuances of getting ready to enter middle school next year, all of that coming up. And I'll try and, in the past, well, like, who cares? But she's like, but obviously she does.
Yeah.
So instead say, well, is this useful?
Yeah.
And talk about it that way, instead of just trying to say, who cares about what so-and-so said or thought or whatever.
Exactly.
Because we care, obviously, or it wouldn't be bugging us that thought was in our mind.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, see, every time I'm like, I got this laundry list of things. Every time I talk to you, I'm like, oh, now I'm going to go try doing this. And I'm going to go try doing that.
I feel the same way I talk to you. So it is absolutely mutual. It is because overwhelm in our minds prevents us from doing what I'm saying right now. So I'm saying, let's think about our thoughts and our emotions. But when we're overwhelmed, because we're not using strategies you suggest, we actually can't do this. That's why I think you and I work so well together. You need to be able to un-overwhelm your mind and your schedule to be able to do what I'm suggesting.
That you've got to have what I like to call that white space or open space.
Absolutely.
Because I always think of that, think of like opening a dam or a river. If all your energy is going in that one direction all day long, there's never the opportunity for anything to come back upstream and get in there. Which I think is going to be my biggest challenge over the holidays, is keeping that downtime, keeping that open space, and not getting into that gentleman start your engines mode of all the, hashtag all the things,
right,
in an effort to create the perfect holiday, whatever the heck that means,
right,
anyway,
exactly.
Instead of saying, no, let's work on creating the really great atmosphere.
Right, the atmosphere that I want, and realizing when all the things start to tumble onto your schedule, it's usually from fear. It's usually you're worried or worry. It's like, well, if I don't add this thing to my calendar, then blank. And then you kind of have to take apart that thought. What will really happen if you don't? Will you be good enough? Is it okay if people talk about you? Why isn't it okay that people are talking about you? When we start to dissect this a little bit, we can start to see that that doesn't align with my values. And that fear is preventing me from having the white space or whatever it is I decide I want. Yeah, we don't want to live in a place of fear. It's just not healthy. It's not healthy, and it makes us regret a lot.
Oh, so good. As always, thank you so much. Where, for all my parent listeners out there, tell them where they can come to connect with you guys. I mean, every parent should be consuming as much content that you put out there as possible. I truly believe it, because like you said, it's been, I have a lot of tools and resources for my daughter to plug into, but then it comes to me going, I don't know how to manage and help that. And that's where you have been so tremendously helpful for me. So where can everybody get connected with you?
I appreciate that. So I have my podcast, which is called Your Parenting Long Game. I have a Facebook group associated with it as well. So it's called Your Parenting Long Game Podcast Community. And then also I actually have a couple of things that I can give your audience.
Fantastic.
Yes. My favorite thing to do is give what I call say this, not that phrases. So I have some of those that I can give to your audience. And there are two topics that I really have honed in on. One is handling big emotions of your kids. So if you are interested in that, I can give you the link to get these resources. And then the other is parent stress. So when we are not
any of that.
Exactly. When we are not stressed, it's so much easier to deal with our kids' big emotions. So I want to be able to help you with both of those things, with parent stress, with your kids' big emotions, and I will give you the link so that you can.
Perfect. So I'll have that in the show notes for everybody as well. And if you are like me and you have a child that feels all the feels, all the emotions. I don't remember one of the first ones that I had gotten from you early on this say this, not that. I had to print it out and keep it tucked in at my desk because But what was so great is after practicing it for so long, now it's more of an automatic response. But
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes the subtlest word change that
Yeah.
you have taught me has made a tremendous difference.
Yeah, unfortunately, sometimes it does take knowing that difference and how their brains are going to react to it. It does. But like you said, there's sort of some simple principles. Once you get them, it becomes much more automatic.
Yeah, and they were not at all natural to me.
Yeah, they're not
And on
intuitive.
every single one of the not that, I was like, check, check,
Yeah.
check. Like I do them all.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Those are the more intuitive ones. So
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much, everybody. Go check out Rachel. I'll put a link to the podcast as well. Definitely start listening. Put that on your weekly listen rotation. It's been on mine for a long time. And I know this is not the last time we'll have you back here as well.
I appreciate that. I'm always happy to talk. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks.